Welcome to the Sleepy Heaven, a place where myths come to life to help you release the worries of the day and enter a state of calm and serenity. I'm your host, John, and I'm delighted that you've decided to join me tonight. In this episode, we'll dive into a tranquil narration of the poignant and timeless tale of Adonis, a mortal of extraordinary beauty who bridged the realms of the living and the dead. Relax, take a deep breath, and let the serenity of this narration guide you on a journey of discovery and balance.
Breathe deeply. With each inhalation, feel how the energy of life expands within you. With each exhalation, allow the accumulated tensions to dissipate, making room for something new. Like the resin that flowed from the myrrh tree, each breath renews you, connecting you with your capacity for transformation. There are moments to vibrate with intensity and others to rest and contemplate. Both stages are essential, and in that balance lies your strength. Allow yourself to rest here and now. Let the story of Adonis inspire you to embrace the cycles of life, finding peace even in the most challenging changes. Breathe, feel, and remember that within you, there is always a place to be reborn. In the lands of Cyprus, a princess was born whose beauty rivaled that of the gods themselves. Her name was Myrrha, daughter of King Cinyras and Queen Cyclade. From birth, Myrrha became the object of admiration and envy, growing up in a world of luxury and adulation. Her skin was like the finest marble, her eyes reflected the bluest skies, and her gait held the grace of a deity. Yet her destiny was marked by a curse that would alter the course of history and give rise to one of the most passionate myths of ancient Greece. It all began with an act of arrogance. Queen Cyclade, Myrrha's mother, was as haughty as she was beautiful. She had grown up surrounded by luxury, accustomed to being the center of attention. Her position as queen only amplified her pride, and her daughter, with her extraordinary beauty, became the jewel that crowned her vanity. Myrrha was not just her child, she was a perfect reflection of her legacy, something she considered superior even to the gifts of the gods. At a banquet in honor of the gods, as wine flowed and laughter filled the air, the queen made the mistake that would seal her family's fate. Surrounded by nobles and servants, she raised her goblet and proclaimed, "There is no creature in this world more beautiful than my daughter Myrrha. Not even Aphrodite herself can compare to her." The hall fell silent. The laughter died out, and the guests exchanged nervous glances. To claim that a mortal surpassed a god in any way was blasphemy that could not go unnoticed. Though some attempted to resume the conversation, the weight of those words lingered in the air like an invisible threat. King Cinyras, seated beside the queen, tried to defuse the situation with a forced laugh. However, he knew the damage had already been done. The murmurs began spreading throughout the hall, and the queen's words soon reached divine ears. Some said it was the forest nymphs who carried the message, eager to see how Aphrodite, the goddess of love and beauty, would respond to such a challenge. From her celestial palace, Aphrodite heard the rumor with a mix of disbelief and anger. The goddess, revered and feared for her power and beauty, could not tolerate such an affront. Aphrodite was not just a deity, she was the epitome of perfection, and the notion that a mere mortal could be compared to her was an unforgivable insult. "A mere mortal more beautiful than me?" she murmured, her eyes glowing with fury. "That woman will pay for her arrogance, but it will be her daughter who bears the curse." Aphrodite decided she would not destroy Mira's beauty, for doing so would admit she saw her as a threat. Instead, she chose a crueler punishment, one that would strike not at her body but at her soul. Descending to the mortal world, wrapped in a halo of light, the goddess observed Mira from afar. The young woman, unaware of the celestial conflict brewing around her, strolled through the palace gardens. Her hair gleamed in the sunlight like liquid gold, and her movements resembled a natural dance. Aphrodite felt a pang of jealousy as she watched. "Is this what they so greatly praise?" she asked with disdain. "Then I will turn this perfection into her downfall." With an elegant gesture, the goddess extended her hand and whispered a curse that wove itself into the air like an invisible mist. Aphrodite planted a dark, forbidden desire in Mira's heart, love for her own father. The curse was subtle at first, like a seed that grows slowly, but Aphrodite knew it would soon bloom, destroying everything Mira held dear. In the days that followed, Mira began to notice a disturbing change within herself. At first, they were fleeting thoughts she could quickly dismiss, but over time, these thoughts became more persistent, invading her dreams and dominating her mind. The young woman fought against them with all her strength, praying to the gods for relief, unaware that it was Aphrodite who had sown this poisonous seed. "Why is this happening to me?" she asked herself in silence, her chest heavy with guilt and shame. At night, when the palace was enveloped in silence, Mira wept in her room, terrified by the feelings that were beginning to consume her. The internal struggle was devastating. She knew her desire was impure and forbidden, yet she was powerless to rid herself of it. Day by day, her beauty began to wither, as if the curse was manifesting itself on her face. From Olympus, the goddess Aphrodite watched with satisfaction. For her, this was a punishment far more gratifying than any physical torment. She knew Mira's soul would slowly be consumed, and her suffering would serve as an eternal reminder that no one, not even a mortal with the most dazzling beauty, could compare to a goddess. Mira's struggle against the feelings that Aphrodite had planted in her heart became unbearable. Each day, her innocent glances at her father turned into internal storms. Every word exchanged carried forbidden meanings that the young princess could not control. Her mind filled with doubts, her heart with guilt, and her will began to crumble under the weight of a curse she did not fully understand. Finally, the moment came when Mira could take no more. She decided that the only escape was to end her life. On a full moon night, when the palace was silent and the candles extinguished, Mira slipped into the gardens. Dressed only in a white tunic, barefoot, and with her hair loose, she walked to a tree that had witnessed her darkest thoughts. In her trembling hands, she held a rope. Her heart beat with a mixture of fear and determination. She believed that by leaving this world, she could free herself from the torment consuming her. However, before she could carry out her tragic plan, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was her nurse, an elderly woman with wise, compassionate eyes. She had served the royal family for decades and had cared for Mira since she was a child. Although the princess had tried to hide her torment, the nurse, with her maternal instinct, had noticed the changes in her. She could not stand idly by while the young woman faced such evident suffering. "Mira, what are you doing?" the nurse asked, her voice a whisper filled with alarm and concern. The princess turned, her eyes brimming with tears. For a moment, she could not find the words to explain the abyss in which she found herself. "I can't go on like this," she finally sobbed. "My heart is filled with impure desires, thoughts that torment me and destroy me from within. I can't bear it any longer." The nurse, horrified yet moved, approached the young woman and embraced her. Her heart broke at Mira's confession, but her experience and wisdom told her that the princess needed more than comfort. She needed a solution, however imperfect. "My child, what you say is terrible, but it is not your fault. The gods play with us, and sometimes we are victims of their cruelty. Perhaps there is a way to ease your torment without you destroying your life." The nurse spent the night reflecting and planning, and she finally conceived an idea. It was risky and dangerous, but in her mind, it was better than allowing Mira to take her own life. During the festival of the gods, when Queen St. Cried could not share King Cineris' bed due to sacred rituals, the nurse decided to act. She approached the king with carefully chosen words and a bold plan. "My king," she said respectfully, "there is a young maiden in the palace who has been captivated by your majesty. She is young, beautiful, and discreet. She wishes to meet with you in secret." The king, intrigued by the proposal and seduced by the idea of a clandestine affair, agreed without asking too many questions. He did not suspect that the maiden she described was, in fact, his own daughter. That same night, Mira, guided by the nurse, met her father in the darkness of the royal chamber. Hidden by shadows and covered with a veil, she surrendered to him, thus consummating the cursed desire Aphrodite had implanted in her heart. For 12 consecutive nights, this deception continued. Mira oscillated between guilt and a fleeting sense of relief, though each encounter deepened her torment. Meanwhile, the king grew increasingly curious about the identity of his mysterious lover. Though he enjoyed their meetings, his mind was restless. He wanted to know more, but the nurse always managed to deflect his questions. On the 12th night, however, everything changed. Consumed by curiosity and the desire to see the face of the young woman who visited him in secret, the king prepared a lamp beside his bed. When Mira fell into a fitful sleep, the king lit the lamp and cautiously illuminated her face. What he saw filled him with indescribable horror. There, before him, was his own daughter. The king's scream echoed throughout the chamber. He went from confusion to disgust and then to uncontrollable rage. His honor was stained, his trust betrayed. Drawing his sword, he intended to take Mira's life to cleanse the dishonor of their incest. Mira, abruptly awakened by the screams and the sound of the unsheathing sword, immediately understood what had happened. The truth had been revealed. Her heart pounding and terror coursing through her veins, she jumped to her feet and fled the palace. Barefoot and clothed in only a thin tunic, she ran into the forest while the king pursued her with blind fury. In the darkness of the night, the princess ran like a cornered animal. Guilt and fear mixed with the echo of her father's footsteps, which grew closer and closer. There was no escape, but Mira knew she could not stop. Her survival depended on continuing to run, even though every step seemed to lead her toward a darker fate. Mira fled through the dark forests of cypress, desperation pulsing with every step. The moon faintly illuminated the path, casting menacing shadows among the trees. Behind her lay the palace, where the echoes of her father's shouts lingered like ghosts in her mind. Her breathing was erratic, her bare feet bloodied, and her heart pounded on the brink of collapse. Yet fear, guilt, and the instinct to survive pushed her onward. In the dim light, her mind wandered through chaotic thoughts and memories. She thought of her mother, Queen St. Cried, who was likely asleep, unaware of the horror that had unfolded in her home. She remembered moments from her childhood when life was simple and her heart was free from the chains that now bound it. But those memories only deepened her torment, for she knew she could never be the same again. Behind her, King Cineris' footsteps drew closer. Though his fury blinded him, his voice thundered through the trees. "Mira, stop. Face the consequences of your actions," he shouted, a mixture of rage and anguish in his tone. Mira knew she could not stop. Each step took her farther from her pursuer, but also closer to an unknown abyss. The forest was vast and hostile, but it was her only hope. Branches tore at her skin and dress, and her bare feet stumbled over roots hidden beneath the earth. Yet her will to live, though fragile, remained stronger than her exhaustion. After hours of running, her strength began to falter. She collapsed to her knees beside a stream. Her reflection in the water showed a face she barely recognized, weary, tear-streaked, and filled with despair. She gazed up at the sky, where the stars shone indifferent to her suffering, and raised her arms in one final plea. "Oh, immortal gods," she cried, her voice trembling. "If my crime deserves punishment, I will not refuse it. But I cannot live like this or face what I have done. Free me from this torment, please, transform my destiny." Her words echoed into the stillness of the night. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the air seemed to thrum with a supernatural energy. The trees whispered as if the gods were deliberating, and a soft breeze enveloped Mira's body. Suddenly, she felt a change within her. Her skin began to harden, as though merging with the earth. Mira did not scream. Instead, she closed her eyes and accepted her fate with a strange peace. Her legs transformed into a sturdy trunk, her arms stretched into branches laden with leaves, and her hair merged into the foliage. Her feet rooted themselves deeply into the ground. Within minutes, where the princess once knelt, a majestic tree now stood. Its bark was smooth but bore cracks from which a fragrant resin oozed, as if the tree wept silently for the tragedy of her life. When King Cinerus finally reached the spot, he froze. Before him was not his daughter, but a tree exuding a sweet, melancholic aroma. At first, he did not understand what had happened. He approached the tree and touched it with trembling hands. The resin stained his fingers, and an inexplicable weight settled in his heart. He knelt beside the trunk and, at last, understood the truth. "Mira," he murmured, his voice breaking. "What have the gods done to you?" The forest seemed to fall silent, as if mourning alongside the king. Cinerus, consumed by guilt and remorse, remained by the tree until dawn. With each passing hour, his initial fury gave way to unbearable sorrow. He realized his pride had played a role in his daughter's fate, and that understanding shattered him. Meanwhile, the tree that had once been Mira became a symbol of repentance and redemption. The resin that seeped from its bark, known as myrrh, was revered as sacred for generations to come. Its sweet aroma and use in religious rituals became an eternal reminder of the princess's sacrifice and the relentless power of the gods. Years passed, and Mira's tree remained steadfast in the place where she had transformed, rooted in the land that bore witness to her story. The people of Cyprus visited the tree to offer tributes and pray for the forgiveness of their own sins. The tale of Mira was passed down through generations, a cautionary legend about pride, desire, and the consequences of defying the gods. Over time, Mira's tree became a symbol of redemption and sorrow in the lands of Cyprus. The resin that seeped from its bark was collected by the local people, who used it in rituals and ceremonies, convinced it held the essence of a sacred story. Yet the tree harbored a secret that mortals could never imagine. Within its trunk, protected by divine magic, a new life was growing. The fruit of the forbidden love between Mira and King Cinerus continued to develop within the tree. For 9 months, the tree's leaves remained greener than ever, as if all its energy was focused on nurturing the being growing inside. When the time came, a crack opened in the bark, and from it emerged a baby of extraordinary beauty. It was a boy, with smooth skin and golden hair that seemed to reflect sunlight. The animals of the forest approached him with curiosity, while a sweet aroma filled the air. The forest nymphs were the first to discover the newborn. Awestruck by his beauty, they wrapped him in soft leaves and flowers. They soon carried the baby to Aphrodite, whose attention had been drawn to the events surrounding Mira's tree. The goddess of love was captivated as she beheld the child. His beauty surpassed anything she had ever seen, and in his eyes, Aphrodite sensed a blend of innocence and power. Feeling an inexplicable connection to him, she decided to take him under her protection. Knowing his origin could spark controversy among the gods, she chose to secretly take the child to the underworld. Aphrodite visited Persephone, queen of the underworld, who ruled with serene yet imposing majesty. She presented the boy, whom she had named Adonis, a name meaning Lord in the Phoenician tongue, and implored Persephone to care for him in secret, raising him in the shadows of Hades, far from the prying eyes of mortals and gods. Persephone, intrigued by the request, reluctantly agreed. Something about the boy's beauty moved her deeply, and she soon began to care for him with a tenderness that contrasted with the darkness of her realm. Adonis grew up surrounded by the silence and calm of the underworld, protected from the disputes and ambitions that plagued Olympus. Meanwhile, Aphrodite could not keep Adonis out of her thoughts. Though she trusted Persephone, she felt the boy was, in some way, a reflection of her own essence, a creation that defied the tragedy of his origin. Periodically, she descended to the underworld to visit him, increasingly captivated by his grace and beauty. These visits did not go unnoticed by Persephone, who began to develop her own attachment to Adonis. As time passed, Adonis grew into a young man whose beauty was unmatched. His presence brightened even the shadowy caverns of Hades, and his gentle nature endeared him to all who encountered him. Persephone regarded him as a son, while Aphrodite began to see him as something more. These conflicting emotions created an unspoken tension between the two goddesses, though neither was willing to openly acknowledge their feelings. One day, Aphrodite descended to the underworld for one of her visits. Upon arriving, she found Adonis sitting by an underground river, gently touching the water's surface. The faint light of the torches illuminated his figure, and Aphrodite felt her heart quicken. For the first time, she could not ignore the intensity of her feelings for him. "Adonis," she said softly, "the time has come for you to see the world of mortals. You cannot stay here forever." Adonis looked up, curious but also confused. He had lived his entire life in the underworld, and though he had heard stories of the world above, he had never felt the need to leave his home. "This is my place," he replied calmly. "Here is all I know." Aphrodite smiled tenderly but with determination. "There is so much more out there. Beauty, love, emotions you have never experienced. Come with me, and I will show you all that the world has to offer." Persephone, who had been watching from the shadows, stepped forward to confront Aphrodite. Her expression was serene, but her words carried firm resolve. "Aphrodite, he belongs to my realm. I have cared for and protected him as if he were my own son. You cannot simply take him away." The two goddesses locked eyes with intensity, each knowing that Adonis had become far more than a mere ward to them. Aphrodite, with her charisma and passion, represented the promise of a world filled with experiences and discoveries. Persephone, with her calm and wisdom, symbolized stability and refuge. Conflict was inevitable. The dispute over Adonis would mark the beginning of a new chapter in the story, one where human and divine emotions would intertwine in unexpected ways. In that moment, Adonis could only watch in bewilderment, unaware that his destiny would become the center of a conflict transcending both life and death. By the time Adonis reached adulthood, his beauty had become legendary. His mere presence could halt conversations and draw the gaze of both mortals and gods. Aphrodite, who had waited patiently for the right moment, finally decided to bring him into the mortal world. For Adonis, it marked the beginning of a new chapter. For her, it was an opportunity to keep him close and guide him under her influence. Aphrodite led Adonis to the surface, showing him landscapes he had only known through stories. The green valleys, majestic mountains, and crystal-clear rivers filled his eyes with wonder. Having grown up surrounded by shadows and tranquility in the underworld, he experienced a newfound sense of freedom. Aphrodite watched his reactions with a mix of pride and delight, thrilled to be the one introducing him to such a vast and marvelous world. During the first days, Aphrodite introduced Adonis to the simple pleasures of mortal life. She taught him the art of gardening, planting flowers together that bloomed under her divine touch. They explored forests where she showed him how to listen to the whispers of the wind through the trees and appreciate the pure beauty of nature. Each shared moment strengthened the bond between them. Despite his initial innocence, Adonis soon began to reciprocate Aphrodite's feelings. There was something irresistible in her smile and gaze. Although she was a goddess and he a mortal, their differences seemed to fade when they were together. Aphrodite spoke to him of love as a force that transcends all barriers, and under her influence, Adonis began to believe it too. In time, Adonis discovered a passion for hunting, an activity that allowed him to explore the world and test his strength. Aphrodite often accompanied him on these expeditions, but her concern for his safety grew. The mortal world was beautiful but also filled with dangers, and she feared for her beloved's well-being. She often warned him, "Adonis, please avoid the largest and most ferocious beasts. Pride can be the most dangerous enemy of a hunter." Adonis, confident in his skills and eager to prove his worth, would often respond with a carefree smile. "Do not worry, Aphrodite. I have learned from the best. Nothing can harm me while you are by my side." His words would momentarily ease the goddess's fears, but a lingering shadow of unease remained. She knew the love she felt for Adonis had made her vulnerable in a way she had never experienced before. Meanwhile, in Olympus, Aphrodite's actions did not go unnoticed. Ares, the god of war and her occasional lover, began watching her relationship with Adonis with growing jealousy. For Ares, the idea of being replaced by a mere mortal was an intolerable insult. His wounded pride led him to secretly follow Aphrodite and Adonis, waiting for the right moment to intervene. One day, while Aphrodite was away, Adonis decided to venture out on a solo hunt. He had heard tales of a giant boar terrorizing a nearby region and, eager to prove his bravery, set off into the forest. Armed with his spear and confidence, he tracked the beast to a clearing surrounded by tall trees. Unbeknownst to him, the boar he hunted was no ordinary beast but Ares, who had taken this form to exact his revenge. When Adonis finally came face to face with the boar, he felt a shiver of both excitement and fear. He threw his spear with skill, but the animal dodged it with supernatural agility. Before Adonis could react, the boar charged at him, driving its tusks into his side. The pain was immediate and excruciating. Adonis collapsed to the ground, his blood soaking the earth beneath him. Aphrodite, far away but always connected to him, felt the pain as if it were her own. Heart pounding with panic, she flew to the forest, following the trail of her beloved. When she arrived, she found him lying in the clearing, his motionless body surrounded by wildflowers stained red. The goddess knelt beside him, cradling him in her arms. Her cries echoed through the forest, and her tears fell onto his face, mingling with his blood. "Adonis, my beloved," she whispered through her sobs, "do not leave me. The world will lose its light without you." Adonis, using his last strength, raised a hand to touch her face. "I will always be with you," he said, his voice weak but full of love. "Even in death, my heart will belong to you." With those words, he exhaled his final breath. Aphrodite, consumed by grief, vowed that his memory would never be forgotten. With her divine power, she transformed Adonis's blood into anemones, flowers of a deep red that would bloom every spring as a reminder of their love. The forest fell silent, and Adonis's sacrifice marked the beginning of a new chapter in the relationship between gods and mortals. The sacrifice of Adonis marked a turning point on Olympus. His death not only awakened Aphrodite's sorrow, but also stirred the gods' fury and jealousy. Persephone, upon learning of his demise, felt a deep pain as though she had lost a son. The queen of the underworld, who had raised Adonis since his childhood, could not accept that his soul would simply disappear. Thus, she decided to claim him for her realm. When Adonis's soul arrived in the underworld, Persephone welcomed him with open arms. Though her heart was heavy with grief, she found solace in having him under her care once more. She prepared a special place for him in her palace, surrounded by flowers she had cultivated in his honor. However, her peace would not last. Aphrodite, unable to accept the loss of her beloved, also descended to the underworld to demand his soul's return. The goddess of love approached Persephone with an expression of resolve. "Adonis does not belong here," Aphrodite declared, her voice firm yet laden with emotion. "His place is with me, where he can live surrounded by light and love, not in the darkness of this realm." Persephone remained calm, though a flicker of displeasure shone in her eyes. "Adonis spent his childhood here, under my care. He is as much a part of my family as he is of yours. His soul belongs to the underworld now. It is his destiny." The tension between the two goddesses was palpable. Their voices echoed through the caverns of Hades, and the shadows seemed to dance to the rhythm of their argument. Each spoke with passion, unwilling to yield. For Aphrodite, Adonis represented a profound and personal love, a connection that transcended mortality. For Persephone, he was an innocent soul who had found comfort in her realm and deserved to rest in peace. As their dispute raged, Olympus began to feel the strain of this division. Zeus, concerned about the balance between realms, decided to intervene before the conflict escalated into catastrophe. He summoned Aphrodite and Persephone to his presence, determined to arbitrate a fair resolution. In the grand hall of Olympus, the two goddesses stood before Zeus's throne. The other gods watched intently, aware of the significance of the judgment that was about to be delivered. Zeus, with his characteristic grave and authoritative voice, began to speak. Aphrodite, Persephone, you both have valid reasons to claim Adonis's soul. However, this conflict serves neither mortals nor gods. Therefore, I have decided that Adonis will divide his time between both realms. Zeus's decree stated that Adonis would spend part of the year with Aphrodite in the world of the living, enjoying the light and passion she could offer. For the remainder of the year, his soul would reside in the underworld, sharing in the calm and reflection of Persephone's domain. Though neither goddess was entirely satisfied, they accepted the compromise. Adonis, whose essence now oscillated between life and death, became a bridge between the two worlds. Each spring, when he returned to Aphrodite, the world burst into bloom with a fervor reflecting the goddess's joy. Flowers blossomed, fields came alive, and love seemed to spread to all living beings. But when autumn arrived, and Adonis returned to the underworld, the earth grew quieter, as if sharing Persephone's melancholy. The agreement introduced a new dynamic between gods and mortals. Followers of Aphrodite celebrated Adonis's return with festivals filled with flowers, music, and dance. Meanwhile, in the underworld, rituals and mysteries in Persephone's honor took on new meaning, symbolizing the duality of life and death. Yet the emotions between Aphrodite and Persephone never fully cooled. Although they respected the arrangement, every encounter with Adonis was charged with deep love and, at times, subtle rivalry. Adonis, for his part, accepted his fate with grace. He understood that his existence symbolized universal balance, a reminder that life and death are inseparable parts of the same cycle. Over time, Adonis's story was passed down as a myth explaining not only the changing seasons but also the nature of love and sacrifice. Each spring, the anemones bloomed as a reminder of the love he had shared with Aphrodite, while the autumn shadows spoke of the solace Persephone had provided. Adonis became a bridge between two worlds, beloved by two goddesses and remembered by all. His story, filled with passion and tragedy, remained an eternal testament to the complexities of divine and mortal love.